Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. To boost or not to boost? Many of you are asking the question now that the feds have opened the shots up to anyone over 18. UW Medicine's Dr. Christine Johnston has some answers right after the headlines. King County names a new sheriff today. A temporary one, anyway, until a permanent hire gets made next year. The county is moving from an elected sheriff to an appointed one after voters okayed the switch. County Executive Dow Constantine will announce his pick for interim sheriff this morning. They'll be sworn in January. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has made a multi-million-dollar gift to the Obama Foundation and another to a medical center at New York University. The Obama Foundation said in a statement that the $100 million gift from Bezos was given in honor of the late Congressman John Lewis, who died last year. Bezos has reportedly asked for the plaza at the Obama Presidential Center, which is under construction in Chicago's South Side, to be named after Lewis. And take care if you're planning to travel this week. There will be snow falling in the mountains over the next few days, so plan for potentially slippery road conditions. The National Weather Service has issued a winter weather advisory in place until 4 o'clock today. If you need to drive through the passes, pack your tire chains and some extra snacks just in case, because you don't want to get hangry if crews have to shut down the roads. Booster shots are now approved for anyone in the U.S. over 18. The news came after months of disagreement from public health officials and questions around whether this was the right strategy, when many countries are still struggling to get people their first doses. But now there's more information on waning vaccine efficacy over time. More and more public health experts are recommending people get their third shot. Christine Johnston is an associate professor at the University of Washington and School of Medicine, and she's here to clarify some confusion. Thanks so much for joining us, Christine. Good to talk to you.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Why has the messaging around boosters been so confusing?
The boosters have been confusing, partly because we've been developing the information about waning immunity as we've been going along. We've also been learning more about the breakthrough infections and the issues with the Delta variant. So I think in addition, we've been learning about the safety of boosters as well. So all of those pieces have played into the decision of whether or not to recommend boosters.
So we're getting a lot of new information because this is a new virus that we're dealing with. Now the CDC says that people over 50 should get the booster shot and that people over 18 may get a booster shot. Does that mean people over 18 don't necessarily need a booster?
It allows people to decide based on their own individual risk whether or not they should get a booster. Some of the things that people may consider about whether or not to be boosted is their own exposure to the virus, whether or not they're out in the community for their work, what the community transmission is. Are they in a community where there's high rates of transmission? Are they in a community where there's a lot of people who are not vaccinated? Those would be some of the considerations. As well, what is your own risk? Do you have underlying conditions that make you higher risk? Or are you caring for people who are higher risk or cannot yet be vaccinated, such as children now under 5? So those are some of the considerations that people could make about whether or not to receive a booster.
Okay, so a lot of this, if you're over 18, is interpreting your own personal risk and comfort level with the vaccine you may already have. Who then really needs a booster?
Well, I think the CDC was clear that people now over 50 should receive a booster, and that's based partly on the fact that we do know that the waning immunity and the breakthrough and the risk is higher for those who are 50 and over.
Okay. What does a booster shot do for people who get it, and does it affect different groups of people differently?
Yeah, so the booster shot, what it really does is it's a memory for your immune system. It reminds your immune system that it's seen this pathogen before, it's seen the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 before, and allows it to create additional immunity to recall that immunity. And it really, we don't have data really so far that it does affect people differently. We do know that waning immunity sometimes is higher in people who are older. So in other words, your immunity wanes more if you're older. And also if you're immunocompromised, your immune response may be different, or you may not have as strong of immune response. But in terms of whether other differences in certain populations to the booster, there really aren't those differences.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a heads up for your system, another wake up. How much protection does a booster offer someone who's already fully vaccinated? What do you know about this?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. It's difficult to quantify, but what we do know from some emerging data is that when people are 6 months or more out from their mRNA vaccine, their immunity does wane. They may be at increased risk for breakthrough infection, symptomatic infection, and maybe a very small increased risk for hospitalization.
Over time, as it gets further away. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay, we have a listener question about so-called mixing and matching.
My name's Quincy. I live here in Seattle. My burning question about the vax booster, if you could just set the record straight about whether or not mixing and matching is going to be helpful and achieve the most efficacy. Should we be mixing and matching? Should we stick with our original brand? What if you got the J&J one-time jab? If you could address any of that, it'd be super helpful. Thanks.
Okay, Christine, you have done research on mixing and matching COVID shots. What did you study, and what's the answer here?
So it's a great question from Quincy, and it's one that many people have. In a study that was sponsored by the NIH, we did study mixing and matching. And what we did in that study is we took people who received any of the three primary series, J&J, Moderna, or Pfizer, and then we gave them a booster with any of the other EUA vaccine series. So people who received either of those three then would receive a J&J booster, for instance, that we did Moderna. And we did this in different groups of people over time. What we found is that any of the boosters with any of the primary series elicited a strong memory response, boosted the immune system, and increased the levels of antibodies over the baseline. So it really did not make a large difference which booster you received. We just saw that boosters across the board were helpful. We also looked at safety and found we didn't find any safety signals that any combinations were worrisome or caused any differences in risk. Now, in terms of what should you do with these data for your own personal boosting, what I would say is for the mRNA vaccines, if any primary series that you receive, go ahead and get boosted either with Pfizer or Moderna. I think that you're going to get a strong boost. We can't see that there's any benefit from doing one over the other. And so you're going to get a strong response no matter what you do. For the J&J primary followed by a J&J boost, we did see slightly lower levels of antibodies. Again, that is an antibody response. We don't know how well that translates into protection, but some people have felt that doing J&J followed by mRNA maybe give you a better boost of that immune response. I also think it really gives an opportunity to be very flexible. So if you're in a setting where only Moderna is available and you received Pfizer initially, just go ahead and get the Moderna.
So I want to talk a little bit about the months-long debate that went on in the medical community about whether boosters were actually necessary for some people. There are people who argued that it would be harmful to encourage people who don't need booster shots to get them because it muddles the messaging of what vaccines are actually for, which you and I have already talked about, to prevent hospitalization. How should we be thinking about the role of vaccination at this stage in the pandemic?
Well, I think that as the pandemic is shifting, we are definitely thinking about the role of vaccination. Of course, part of the initial muddled message, I think, with boosters or kind of the debate was that we really want to get everyone vaccinated with the primary series. And that was really the priority early on. And we know still that is the best way to control this pandemic. If we could get everyone who can be vaccinated as quickly as possible, that really is our way out. I think with the realization that everyone cannot be will not be vaccinated, or that we've had some issues clearly with vaccine uptake, that has caused part of this shift in relying on boosters. There's more community transmission than we would like to see, than we would be seeing, we think, if everyone was boosted. And then, of course, the waning immunity. I think at this point, the goal of vaccination is, as it has always been, both to protect ourselves against severe disease, also, I think, against infection and transmission. We are getting some emerging data there.
All right, stand by. We have another question from a listener. This is Jody on Mercer Island.
I had a question about boosters. Do boosters become more effective day by day, or is it like the vaccine where it's sort of flat and then it becomes quite effective at the end? I'm asking because my husband got a breakthrough case 2 days after I got my booster, and we were wondering, am I more protected every day, or am I going to be protected in the end? Thank you.
Yes, great question, Jody, and sorry to hear about the breakthrough infection. What happens with boosters is similar to the primary series, that it does take some time after receiving it to develop the immune response, to reawaken the immune response. So I would say, between 7 and 14 days, you're going to have much higher immune response again than you did prior to the booster. And then it does stay high in a steady state for some time. We don't know how long the booster will last, actually. That's some of the data that's going to be developing over the next few months. But we do know, at least from the primary series, that it very slowly waned. And so, we expect that you will have high protection for the next several weeks to months.
After we've been talking about this, I wonder if there are any reasons for someone who is eligible to get a booster to not get a booster.
I would say that there are very few reasons why someone shouldn't get a booster if they're eligible. Perhaps if people have had more significant adverse reactions to the primary series, I definitely think that would be a time to speak with a provider and determine whether you should or should not get a booster. If people really are, not interacting with others, with the community, if you're in a situation where you really are able to stay home, isolate, and that's something you continue to want to do, that would be, a booster may not be required in that case. If you're really, not interacting with anyone who's at risk and your community around you is highly vaccinated, you may want to consider putting it off.
Nobody should worry, though, that they're taking a vaccine from someone else at this point.
At this point, I think the global inequities are very stark and very sad, and it really is a terrible thing for global health that we haven't been able to do a better job with vaccine distribution and vaccine equity. That said, I've heard some people say, we need to do both, and I think that's what we are trying to do. And I think that people shouldn't worry about taking a vaccine from someone else. You not taking a vaccine is not going to help get that into arms elsewhere in the world.
Right. Do you imagine once more people start getting booster shots that businesses might require proof of boosters at some point?
I think that's another great question that's out there. And I think that we have learned to say never with this vaccine, right? With this virus, we've been humbled so many times. But I do think that at this point, I do think that we have quite high protection still with the primary series, and I would be surprised if we really did go beyond just requiring the primary series. But again, I would never say never.
Christine Johnston is an associate professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Really good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Trish. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show, which is also made by Clare McGrane, Diana Opong, Jenny Cecil Moore, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy.